Hello and welcome to another summer movie review from your trusty old film geek, Stoudman. This week, I'll be reviewing Terminator Salvation starring Christian Bale. Now, before I even get into the movie, as with all the movies that have come out this May, there seems to be a bit of controversy surrounding this one as well. Most of us have probably heard by now the tirade that Christian Bale went on during the shooting of a scene for this film when someone was interrupting his scene with distracting movements. On one hand, you have to be at least a little bit pleased that Bale takes his acting so seriously, and yet on the other hand, you really have to ask yourself what he was getting so upset about after you've seen the film. This is not to say that it was a bad film. In fact, it was far from it. However, it just seems like he played the strong silent type throughout the whole film, which means he didn't have many long lines, and so he really couldn't have much to complain about. That aside, the other controversy surrounding this film is recent, as it was discovered that the new Night at the Museum film beat out Terminator Salvation in its opening weekend. Why? Why is it that people would rather watch some semi-decent comedy with Ben Stiller than a long-awaited sequel to one of the greatest sci-fi action flicks of all time? Whatever the reason, I wouldn't say it was a total flop, as it still raked in about $48 million in its opening weekend. Let's just hope it fares better in the coming weeks. The reason I want it to do well is that this movie really was a lot better than I was expecting. Let me begin the review here by saying that I know a lot of people didn't like Terminator 3, but although I wasn't a fan, I still liked it okay. I didn't hate it, you know? It's not like it was the worst movie of all time. However, with the series on a downturn, I was most definitely concerned that this film, starring and being directed and produced by a bunch of people who up to this point have had nothing to do with the Terminator series, would be a total flop. Just because Christian Bale is in it doesn't mean it will be great. In fact, there were points in the film where he started to sound like Batman again. This isn't Bruce Wayne, this is John Connor. There's a difference. One is post-apocalyptic, one isn't. The end! Now, I've been criticized for saying that Edward Furlong, the actor who played John Connor in Terminator 2, would not have been a bad choice to come back in this film. Sure, he's a child actor gone awry, but with a little makeup, I think he'd be fine in the role. It's not like Christian Bale comes in and just blows you away as John Connor in this film. He did about as well as I think Furlong could have done. Regardless of all that, let's get to the rating system before you get to thinking that I don't like this movie, because I actually really do like this movie. Now, for the category of film as art, or film in terms of art, a movie could qualify on a lot of different levels. However, I felt this film really only qualified on one level, that of the visual style of the film. The colors and lighting used in this film were simply superb, and while the average viewer wouldn't notice the manipulation, I feel it's important for me to mention because it really does add a whole new and important dimension to this film. We're talking about a story set in a post-apocalyptic future in which robots rule the world. You're not going to expect a lot of greens or blues or anything like that in terms of colors. Instead, you'd expect to see dull, lifeless colors of gray, silver, black, and brown. And for the most part, that's all you see in this film. The only time you see colors like green or blue is when there is an important life force involved in the scene. A good example would be when two particular characters are sitting by a fire and there is a blackness all around them, but they are touched by the light of the bright orange fire. This, in essence, is visual art. As such, and for only this type of artistic approach, I have to give this film an A, because it was done brilliantly enough that the average viewer would not notice it, but would definitely subconsciously accept what it was trying to tell them. And in a way, that's exactly what you're trying to do when you make a film. As for the category of special effects, obviously in a film like this, you're going to see a lot of them. I have to say, for the most part, they all looked crisp, clean, and realistic. There's even a scene towards the end with a special appearance by someone I will not mention, except for that it is probably the most effective and realistic looking CGI I have ever seen. I am not the kind of reviewer who gives spoilers at all, so just take my word for it that this special appearance is quite impressive and entertaining to see. As such, I give special effects an A as well. They were very well done, seamless additions to the film, which make you feel engrossed in the story as much as possible. Now for the story, I have to say it was really well done. While it was easy to get a sense for what was going to happen in the story sometimes 5 to 10 minutes in advance, it was nothing so crazy that you just knew the ending right from the beginning of the film. I was always left intrigued by what happened next, and there were definitely a few surprising scenes, such as the one I mentioned in the special effects category. The story felt complete, and combined with the art style and the special effects, it was effective in engrossing the viewer. More appealing to me than anything was that the story really felt like a Terminator story. It didn't feel like an unnecessary addendum to like so many sequels this far down the line seem to become. It felt like it really belonged right alongside the first two films, as sort of a prequel. Very well done and very entertaining, but because it was kind of easy to tell what was going to happen a few minutes in advance, I have to give the story a B. However, combined with the great artistic vision and the great special effects, a slight issue such as this seems almost insignificant. The real problem I had with this film was the acting. While I didn't feel that anybody really delivered a horrible performance in the cast, I just felt like some of them were pretty stale, boring, and pointless. The most particularly unappealing performance was sadly from Mr. Bale. Yes, the one who was so upset about somebody interrupting what was no doubt another mailed-in performance. Honestly, he felt more like Hayden Christensen in this role than he did like himself. His lines weren't much of a help, though, which was another issue with the story. I mean, see if you can count how many times he says John Connor in the film. However, I just felt like he could have done better. The fantastic art style surrounded him, and had he performed up to par, he could have made this film just as good as T2, just with his acting, in my opinion. However, he just mailed in his performance in this film. It just wasn't anything awe-inspiring. It wasn't amazing. After looking back on it, I have to say the guy that played the young Kyle Reese did a pretty good job, though. He did do a very good job. And he looks exactly like the original actor who played Kyle Reese, which is kind of creepy if you think about it. However, all the other acting performances in this film were just decent. Nothing to write home about. Overall, I have to give the acting a C. Obviously, if everything had clicked with this film, it would have been great. But you can't always make movie magic happen, even if you have some of the most important elements down pat. However, regardless of the so-so acting and the slightly troublesome story, the film shined through for me because the visual art style in particular was such a delight to see, as it has really followed the true feeling of the original films in the series. If only for that reason, I think people should see this movie, just to see how much of a story can be told just by what you see, rather than depending on what you are told and can hear. I hope this review has been helpful for you in deciding whether or not you want to see this movie. And I really hope that if you like this series and are on the fence about this film in particular, you'll at least give it a shot, because I can tell you right now that it is more than deserving. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll tune back in a couple of weeks when I deliver my review of Land of the Lost on June 8th.